The photograph curled into ash in the backyard fire pit, its edges glowing red before crumbling into nothing. Ethan's scream tore through the evening air, raw and jagged, as he lunged toward the flames, too late to save the only image of him and Caleb together. His father, Chief Raymond Holt, stood motionless, the lighter still in his hand, his jaw set like stone. Ethan's knees hit the grass, his hands clawing at the dirt, as if he could unearth the moment the fire had stolen. A Polaroid of him and Caleb laughing under the pier at Willow Lake, their foreheads pressed together, Caleb's arm slung over Ethan's shoulder. It was the only proof of them, of us, Ethan thought, his chest heaving. In the small town of Everton, Tennessee, where secrets were currency and judgment was law, that photo had been their rebellion, their quiet vow. Now it was gone, and Ethan's world felt like it was burning with it. He looked up at his father, the man who'd raised him to be tough, to be right, to be the son of Everton's police chief. Raymond's face was unreadable, but his eyes, those cold, gray eyes, flickered with something Ethan couldn't name. Regret? Shame? Or just the same stubborn pride that had ruled their house for 18 years? "Get up," Raymond said, his voice low, like he was issuing an order to one of his deputies. "You're making a scene." "A scene?" Ethan's voice cracked, venom seeping through. "You burned it, Dad. You burned us." Raymond turned away, his broad shoulders rigid under his starched uniform. "You don't understand, Ethan. This town, it doesn't work like that. You can't just..." "Can't what?" Ethan shot to his feet, fists clenched. "Love him? Be with him? You think you can control that by burning a picture?" The air between them crackled, heavy with years of unspoken rules. Everton was a place where tradition was gospel, where the Holt family name meant duty, order, and appearances. Ethan had always known his father's expectations. Play football, date a nice girl, take over the family legacy someday. But Caleb, wild, fearless Caleb with his sharp wit and soft hands, had changed everything. It started 6 months ago, in the spring of their senior year. Ethan, the quarterback with a future mapped out, met Caleb at a bonfire party by the lake. Caleb was new to Everton, a transplant from Chicago with a chipped front tooth and a laugh that cut through the noise. He didn't care about fitting in, didn't bow to the town's unspoken codes. That night, under a sky thick with stars, Caleb had leaned close and whispered, "You're not like them, are you?" Ethan's heart had stuttered, and for the first time, he felt seen. They'd been careful, meeting in secret at the abandoned mill, in the woods, or in Caleb's beat-up Chevy. The Polaroid was their one reckless act, a moment of defiance captured under the pier. Caleb had grinned as he shook the photo dry, saying, "This is ours, Ethan. No one could take it." But someone had. Raymond must have found it in Ethan's room, tucked inside his physics textbook. Ethan hadn't even known his father was home that afternoon, hadn't heard the creak of the floorboards or the rustle of pages. When he'd walked into the backyard and saw the fire pit glowing, saw the photo in his father's hand, time had slowed to a sickening crawl. Now, standing in the yard, Ethan's throat burned with words he couldn't say. He wanted to scream that Caleb wasn't a phase, wasn't a mistake. He wanted to tell his father about the nights they'd spent talking about dreams bigger than Everton. Caleb's plan to study art in New York, Ethan's secret hope to write stories instead of enforce laws. But the words stuck, choked by the weight of his father's stare. Raymond finally spoke, his voice softer now, almost broken. "I did it for you, Ethan. To protect you. This town, it'll eat you alive if you don't fit." "Protect me?" Ethan laughed, bitter and hollow. "You just set fire to the only thing that makes me feel alive." He turned and ran, his sneakers pounding against the grass, then the pavement, until the house was a blur behind him. The streets of Everton were quiet, the kind of quiet that smothered you, but Ethan didn't care. He needed Caleb. He needed to know they were still real, even without the photo. Caleb's house was on the edge of town, a small rental with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. Ethan banged on the door, his chest tight with panic. When Caleb opened it, his dark eyes widened, taking in Ethan's red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. Ethan, what? He burned it. Ethan said, his voice breaking. My dad. The picture. It's gone. Caleb pulled him inside, shutting the door against the world. In the dim light of the living room, with its mismatched furniture and Caleb's sketches pinned to the walls, Ethan felt the storm in his chest start to quiet. Caleb's arms wrapped around him, strong and steady, and for a moment, they were untouchable. We don't need the picture, Caleb whispered, his lips brushing Ethan's temple. We're still here. We're still us. But Ethan couldn't shake the fear clawing at him. His father wasn't just a man. He was Everton's law, its moral compass. If Raymond Holt could burn a photo, what else would he do to keep Ethan in line? As they sat on Caleb's couch, hands intertwined, Ethan made a silent vow. He wouldn't let his father's fear, or this town's, define him. He and Caleb would fight for their story, no matter what it cost. The next morning, Everton woke to a gray sky, the kind that pressed down like a warning. Ethan hadn't slept, his mind replaying the fire, his father's face, the way the Polaroid had curled into nothing. He sat on Caleb's couch, staring at the sketches on the wall, bold lines and vibrant colors, Caleb's way of seeing a world bigger than this town. Caleb was in the kitchen, brewing coffee in a pot that looked older than both of them. You okay? He asked, leaning against the doorway, his voice gentle but probing. Ethan shook his head. I don't know how to face him. He's not just my dad, Caleb. He's Chief Holt. Everyone in this town listens to him. If he says I'm wrong, they'll believe it. Caleb crossed the room, sitting beside him. Then we make them see you're not. We don't have to hide forever, Ethan. We can be louder than him. Louder. Ethan's laugh was sharp, edged with fear. You don't get it. He could make your life hell. He could. He won't. Caleb cut in, his voice firm. Because I'm not scared of him. And you shouldn't be either. But Ethan was scared. Not just of his father, but of what Everton could do. He'd grown up hearing the whispers. About the gay couple who'd left town after their tires were slashed. About the teacher who'd been fired for inappropriate conduct after being seen with his partner. Everton didn't just judge, it punished. Still, Caleb's defiance was contagious. By noon, they were walking through town, not holding hands but close enough that their shoulders brushed. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like shouting. They stopped at the diner, where the waitress, Mrs. Clara, gave them a knowing smile. She'd always been kind, slipping Ethan extra fries when he was a kid, but today her eyes lingered like she saw something new in him. Be careful, boys, she said softly as she refilled their coffee. Folks around here talk. Ethan's stomach twisted, but Caleb just grinned. Let's talk. They'll get tired eventually. That afternoon, they drove to Willow Lake, with a pier stretched over water so still it mirrored the clouds. It was their place where the Polaroid had been taken. Ethan sat on the edge, his legs dangling, while Caleb sketched in his notebook, the scratch of pencil on paper as steady rhythm. I want to leave, Ethan said suddenly, the words spilling out. After graduation, go somewhere no one knows me. Somewhere I can be this. He gestured between them, his voice thick. Caleb looked up, his eyes softening. Then we'll go. New York, maybe. You're right, I paint. We'll figure it out. Ethan wanted to believe it, but the weight of his father's act hung over him. Raymond hadn't just burned a photo. He declared war on who Ethan was. And Ethan knew his father wasn't done. He was right. That evening, as they drove back to town, a police cruiser pulled them over. Ethan's heart sank as he recognized the driver, Deputy Mark Evans, his father's right-hand man. Ethan, Mark said, leaning into the window, his tone clipped. Your dad wants you home. Now. Caleb's jaw tightened, but Ethan nodded, knowing resistance would only make things worse. As they followed the cruiser back to the Holt house, Ethan's mind raced. What did his father want? An apology? A promise to change? The house was dark when they arrived, except for a single light in the living room. Raymond sat in his armchair, still in uniform, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Ethan had never seen his father drink on a weekday. Sit, Raymond said, his voice heavy. Caleb stayed by the door, arms crossed, but Ethan obeyed, sinking into the couch. "I didn't raise you for this," Raymond started, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I gave you everything, structure, values, a name people respect, and you're throwing it away for him." Ethan's hand shook, but he forced his voice steady. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trying to be honest." "Honest?" Raymond's laugh was bitter. "You think this town will let you be honest? You think they'll cheer for you? They'll tear you apart, Ethan, and I won't be able to protect you." "Maybe I don't need your protection," Ethan snapped. "Maybe I just need you to listen." Raymond's face hardened, but before he could respond, Caleb stepped forward. "Chief Holt, with all due respect, you don't get to decide who Ethan is, or who I am. You burned a photo, not our lives." The room went silent, the air thick with tension. Raymond's grip on his glass tightened, and for a moment, Ethan thought his father might explode. But instead, Raymond stood and walked out, leaving them alone in the dim light. As Ethan and Caleb left the house, hand in hand this time, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe they could be louder than his father's fear. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan avoided his father, staying at Caleb's as much as possible, but Everton's eyes were everywhere. At school, whispers trailed him in the hallways, glances that lingered too long. Someone had seen him and Caleb at the lake, or maybe Mrs. Clara had let something slip. Either way, the town was starting to talk. Caleb, true to form, didn't care. He walked into school with his head high, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, daring anyone to say something. Ethan envied that fearlessness, but he couldn't shake the dread pooling in his gut. His father's silence was worse than his anger. It was a storm brewing, and Ethan knew it would break soon. One afternoon, during lunch, Ethan's best friend, Jamal, pulled him aside in the cafeteria. Jamal was the team's wide receiver, built like a tank, but with a heart that didn't match. "People are saying stuff, man," he said, his voice low, "about you and that new guy. You good?" Ethan hesitated. Jamal had been his friend since they were kids, tossing a football in the backyard while Raymond grilled burgers. But this was different. "Yeah," Ethan said finally. "I'm good. Better than good." Jamal's eyes searched his, then he nodded. "All right. Just watch your back. Your dad's been in a mood at the station." That night, Ethan and Caleb met at the old mill, their safest hideout. The building was a skeleton of its former self, all rusted beams and broken windows, but it was theirs. They sat on a blanket, sharing a thermos of coffee, the air cool with the promise of fall. "I told Jamal," Ethan said, staring at the floorboards. "Not everything, but enough." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "And he didn't freak out. That's something, right?" "It's everything," Caleb said, his hand finding Ethan's. "One person at a time, Ethan. That's how we change this place." But changing Everton felt impossible when Ethan's own father was against him. The next day, Raymond called Ethan into his office at the police station, a place Ethan had always associated with pride, his dad's name on the door, the badge gleaming on his chest. Now it felt like a courtroom. "I've been thinking," Raymond said, leaning back in his chair. "You're 18. You're an adult. If you want to keep doing this, I can't stop you. But I can't have it under my roof." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm giving you a choice," Raymond said, his voice steady but his eyes avoiding Ethan's. "You can stay, follow my rules, or you can leave. Your call." Ethan stood, his chair scraping the floor. "You're asking me to choose between you and who I am. That's not a choice, Dad." He walked out, his heart pounding, and found Caleb waiting in the parking lot. Without a word, Caleb pulled him into a hug, and Ethan let himself break, tears soaking Caleb's shirt. "I'm done hiding," Ethan said when he could speak again. "I'm done letting him win." Caleb grinned, fierce and proud. "Then let's make some noise." They started small, holding hands at the diner, sitting close at the football game. Each act was a brick in the wall they were building, a wall to shield them from the town's judgment. But Ethan knew his father wasn't done. Raymond Holt didn't lose, not in Everton. Sure enough, a week later, Caleb's tires were slashed outside his house. The word freak was scrawled on his windshield in red paint. Ethan's stomach churned as he helped Caleb clean it off, both of them silent, the weight of the act pressing down. "It's not him," Ethan said, scrubbing harder than necessary. "My dad wouldn't do this." Caleb's eyes were dark, unreadable. "Maybe not, but someone did, and they think they can scare us." They reported it to the police, but the officer, another of Raymond's deputies, barely took notes, promising to look into it with a smirk. Ethan's hope flickered, but Caleb's didn't. "We keep going," Caleb said. "We don't stop." That night, they kissed under the pier, the lake lapping at the posts, and Ethan felt a fire in him that no one could burn out. Not his father, not the town. But as they drove back, headlights flashed in the rearview mirror, and Ethan's heart sank. Another cruiser. Another warning. The cruiser didn't follow them long, but its presence lingered like a ghost. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his father was behind it, watching, waiting for him to break. At school, the whispers grew louder, and Ethan noticed fewer people met his eyes. Even Jamal seemed distant, his jokes forced, his glances uneasy. Caleb, though, was a rock. He started leaving sketches in Ethan's locker, small drawings of them together, a lighthouse, a city skyline. "For when you forget we're bigger than this place," he'd say. Each one was a lifeline, pulling Ethan through the days. But the pressure was building. One night, Ethan overheard his father on the phone, his voice low and tense. "I don't care what it takes, Mark. Keep an eye on them." Ethan's blood ran cold. His father wasn't just disapproving, he was surveilling them. The next day, Ethan confronted him at the station. "Are you having us followed?" he demanded, storming into Raymond's office. Raymond didn't flinch. "I'm doing my job, protecting this town." "From what? Me?" "Caleb." Ethan's voice rose, drawing stares from the deputies outside. "You're not protecting anyone. You're just scared." Raymond's face darkened. "You think you know what fear is? Try being the man everyone looks to for answers. Try knowing your son's throwing his life away." "I'm not throwing anything away," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "I'm trying to live it." He left before his father could respond, but the words echoed in his head. That night, he and Kayla made a plan. They'd save money, graduate, and leave everyone behind. New York was still the dream, but it felt further away with every passing day. Then came the rally. Everton's annual fall festival was approaching, and the town square was buzzing with preparations. Caleb had an idea. They'd set up a booth, not for crafts or food, but for art. His sketches, bold and unapologetic, would be their statement. Ethan was nervous, but Caleb's fire was infectious. "We're not hiding," Caleb said, painting a sign that read "Art for All." "Let them see us. Let them deal with it." The festival was a riot of color and noise. Kids running with cotton candy, country music blaring from speakers, the smell of fried dough in the air. Their booth stood out, Caleb's sketches pinned to a board, vibrant and raw. People stopped, some smiling, some whispering, but Ethan felt alive, standing beside Caleb, their shoulders touching. Until Raymond arrived. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. Ethan's heart raced, but Caleb squeezed his hand. "We got this," he whispered. A woman approached, her face tight with disapproval. "This is a family event," she said, gesturing at a sketch of two men holding hands. "You shouldn't be here." Before Ethan could speak, Caleb stepped forward. "Art's for everyone, ma'am. So's love." The crowd murmured, some nodding, some turning away. Ethan saw his father's jaw tighten, but Raymond didn't move. For the first time, Ethan felt like they'd won something. But victory was fleeting. That night, someone vandalized their booth, tearing down the sketches and spray painting slurs across the table. Ethan and Caleb stood in the wreckage, the festival lights still twinkling around them, and Ethan felt the weight of Everton's hatred. "It's not over," Caleb said, his voice fierce. "They can tear this down, but they can't tear us down." Ethan wanted to believe him, but as they cleaned up the mess, he couldn't shake the feeling that his father's shadow was behind it. The next day, he found a note slipped under his door at home, in Raymond's handwriting. "This has to stop." Ethan's hand shook as he read it. He didn't know if it was a warning or a plea, but it felt like a line in the sand. He and Caleb had to decide, fight or run. Ethan couldn't sleep that night, the note burning a hole in his pocket. He and Caleb met at the pier, the lake reflecting a moon that felt too bright for their mood. Caleb read the note, his face hardening. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Caleb said, crumpling the paper. Ethan shook his head. "He thinks he's saving me. From you, from myself, from everything." Caleb tossed the note into the water, watching it sink. "Then we show him he's wrong. We show everyone." They decided to fight. The next week, they organized a small gathering at the community center, a safe space event for anyone who felt like they didn't fit in Everton. Caleb spread the word through flyers and social media, while Ethan reached out to Elias, Jamal, Mrs. Clara, even their English teacher, Miss Torres, who'd always encouraged Ethan's writing. The turnout was small, but powerful. A dozen people showed up, including a girl from their class who'd been bullied for being trans, and an older man who'd lived alone since his partner left town years ago. They shared stories, laughed, cried. Ethan read a poem he'd written about Caleb, his voice shaking but clear. When he finished, the room clapped, and Caleb's eyes shone with pride. But word got back to Raymond. The next day, he called Ethan into his office again. This time, he wasn't alone. Deputy Mark stood by the door, his arms crossed. "You're making a spectacle," Raymond said, his voice low. "You're dragging our family name through the mud." Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm not ashamed of who I am, Dad. You should be ashamed of trying to stop me." Raymond's face flushed, but he didn't raise his voice. "I've given you every chance, Ethan. I've tried to protect you. But if you keep this up, there'll be consequences." "What? You'll arrest me?" Ethan shot back. "For being in love." Raymond didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. Ethan left, his heart pounding, and found Caleb outside, leaning against his car. "He's not going to let this go," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "He's going to keep pushing until we break." Caleb pulled him close. "Then we don't break. We keep going. For us, for everyone at that meeting." But the consequences came faster than they expected. 2 days later, Caleb was called into the principal's office. A concerned parent had complained about his disruptive behavior at the festival and the community center. The principal, under pressure from the school board, suspended Caleb for a week. Ethan was furious. He stormed into his father's office, slamming the door. "Did you do this? Did you get Caleb suspended?" Raymond looked up from his paperwork, his face calm. "I told you, Ethan. Actions have consequences." Ethan felt like he'd been punched. "You're punishing him for existing, for being with me." "I'm protecting this town," Raymond said, but his voice wavered, just for a moment. Ethan left, his mind racing. He and Caleb met that night at the mill, their anger and fear spilling over. "We can't stay here," Ethan said, pacing. "He'll keep coming after us." Caleb nodded, his jaw tight. "Then we leave, sooner than we planned. We got enough saved for bus tickets. We could go to New York, start over." It was a reckless plan, but it felt like their only option. They spent the night making arrangements, pooling their money, packing what little they needed. As dawn broke, Ethan wrote a letter to his father, his hand shaking as he poured out everything. His love for Caleb, his dreams, his pain. "I hope one day you'll understand," he wrote. "I hope one day you'll regret what you did." They left the letter on the kitchen table and slipped out before sunrise, their bags slung over their shoulders, their hands clasped tight. Everton was still asleep, unaware of the rebellion walking out its doors. The bus station was a gray slab of concrete, the air thick with exhaust and the hum of idling engines. Ethan and Caleb sat on a bench, their bags at their feet, tickets to New York clutched in Caleb's hand. The sun was rising, painting the sky in streaks of pink, but Ethan felt no warmth. Leaving meant freedom, but it also meant leaving everything he'd known, his home, his friends, his father. Caleb sensed his hesitation. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice soft. Ethan looked at him, at the chipped tooth and the eyes that had never wavered. "I'm sure about you," he said. "That's enough." The bus ride was long, the hours blurring into a haze of fields and highways. They talked about their plans, finding a cheap apartment, getting jobs, chasing their dreams. Caleb sketched in his notebook, his pencil flying over the page, while Ethan wrote in a journal, capturing the moment they'd chosen themselves over Everton. But back in town, Raymond found the letter. He sat at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the tick of the clock. Ethan's words cut deeper than he'd expected. "You burned the only proof of us, but you can't burn what's in my heart." Raymond's hands shook as he read, his whiskey glass untouched beside him. He drove to the station, his uniform feeling heavier than usual. He asked questions, checked logs, but the boys were gone. For the first time in years, Raymond felt powerless, not as a police chief, but as a father. In New York, Ethan and Caleb found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, barely big enough for a bed and a table. It was a far cry from Everton's wide streets, but it was theirs. They worked odd jobs, Caleb at an art supply store, Ethan at a bookstore, saving every penny for their future. At night, they explored the city, holding hands without fear, kissing under streetlights. But Everton wasn't done with them. A month after they left, Jamal called Ethan, his voice tense. "Your dad's been asking about you. He's different, quieter. I think he's starting to get it." Ethan didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to believe his father could change, but the memory of the burning photo was still raw. He thanked Jamal and hung up, turning to Caleb. "Do you think he'll ever come around?" Ethan asked, his voice small. Caleb shrugged, his hand finding Ethan's. "Maybe, but we don't need him to. We've got this." Back in Everton, Raymond started noticing things he'd ignored. The way people whispered about those boys, the way his deputies smirked when Caleb's name came up. He started questioning his own rules, his own fears. One night, he pulled the charred remains of the Polaroid from a drawer, the edges brittle, but the image faintly visible. Two boys laughing in love. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he wrote a letter of his own, addressed to Ethan, though he didn't know where to send it. "I was wrong," he wrote. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was protecting myself. I'm sorry." He didn't send it. Not yet. But he kept it, folded in his wallet, a reminder of the son he'd pushed away. In New York, Ethan and Caleb were building a life. Caleb's art was gaining attention, small galleries showing his work. Ethan's stories were finding their way into local magazines. They were happy, but the shadow of Everton lingered, a reminder of what they'd fought to escape. 2 years later, Ethan and Caleb were still in Brooklyn, their apartment now filled with art and books, a testament to their dreams taking root. They'd built a community, friends who celebrated them, mentors who pushed them to grow. But Ethan still carried Everton in his bones, a quiet ache that surfaced when he least expected it. One day, a letter arrived, forwarded from Jamal. The handwriting was unmistakable, Raymond's. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it, Caleb at his side. "I was wrong," the letter began. "I thought I was saving you, but I was breaking you. I burned that photo because I was scared of what the town would say, of what I didn't understand. I see it now, Ethan. I see you. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to make things right." Attached was a check, enough to cover a year's rent. And a new photo, not the one Raymond had burned, but a snapshot from Ethan's childhood, him and his father fishing at Willow Lake, smiling. On the back, in Raymond's scrawl, "I hope we can make new memories." Ethan cried, the weight of years falling away. Caleb held him, silent, letting him feel it all. They talked late into the night, weighing their options. Ethan wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but he wanted to try. They decided to visit Everton, just for a weekend, to see if the town, and Raymond, had changed. The drive back was surreal, the familiar streets both foreign and haunting. They met Raymond at the diner, Mrs. Clara beaming as she served them coffee. Raymond looked older, his hair grayer, his eyes softer. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "For the photo, for everything. I want to know you, Ethan. Both of you. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward silences, old wounds that stung. But it was a start." Ethan and Caleb walked through Everton hand in hand, and though some stares lingered, others smiled. Mrs. Clara hugged them, Jamal slapped Ethan's back, and Ms. Torres slipped them a book of poetry. As they stood under the pier, the lake glittering in the sunlight, Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. The town wasn't theirs anymore, but it wasn't their enemy either. They'd fought for their love, and they'd won, not just against Everton, but for themselves. Raymond joined them, hesitant, holding a new Polaroid camera. "Can I?" he asked, his voice small. Ethan nodded, and Caleb grinned, pulling Ethan close. The camera clicked, capturing them against the water, their smiles bright, their hands intertwined. Raymond looked at the photo as it developed, his eyes wet. "I'll keep this one safe," he said. And for the first time, Ethan believed him.